Hello, everybody. Good evening, and welcome to our Ladies in Tech Africa project management class. Okay, I see a few persons saying good evening. So, without someone is saying good evening, sir. So clearly, I'm not a sir. Today is not Mr. Kingsley's class. Today is going to be Nancy's class. Regardless, we can still say hello to Mr. Kingsley, who is also still on this class, for those that want to say hi to him. So I do hope we had a great weekend. Good evening, Orelwa. It's been a minute. Good evening, Ayodele. Good evening, Becky. Good evening, Eando. Aondo. I'm very bad with names. So before we dive into today's class, which as we can all see is project scheduling, which is boldly written on our screens or showing on our screens, I want to get from the class. How was the last class with Mr. Kingsley? How was the topics? Can you tell me what you took from the last class before we move into this class to make sure that everybody's in the clear? Okay. China Merriam said the last class was quite interesting. Ooh, please do tell. So, risk identification and mitigation as a project manager. That sounds interesting. Adejoke said she learned about WBS and Gantt charts. Okay. Sheila Merriam said risks cannot be avoided, but they can be well handled. That is very, very true. That is so true. I'm glad. I'm seeing that the class is interactive. Adejoke said it's been so wonderful. I've learned advantages of the WBS Gantt charts. Okay, I learned it's not wrong to think of negative outcomes and prepare contingency or action plans by Kainde. Makes sense. That's really good. Aditya said she learned about risk management, identification, and mitigation. That's also very interesting. Feasibility studies important, said Gift. Great. Okay. Zoe said, I learned that we always have to think negatively in order to be able to avoid those negative thoughts coming to play in your project. That's really good. Ubo said, I learned it's important to plan for risks to smallest of them. Can you hear me now? I don't know if you can hear me now. Okay, great. Okay, great. I'm glad that you can hear me. So I'm really glad that everyone picked something from the last class and you have really okay. Olariwaju said, I learned identifying the risks and offering solutions to avoid negative thoughts and reviewing your project weekly. Okay. Wando said, I learned that we can make several methods for advert breaks by reviewing past projects and interview experts who had worked on similar projects. Great. So Owando means that you are looking forward to working with other project managers, meaning that you're willing to collaborate with other project managers. And that is really amazing. That is another plus way to go about it. I can see your amazing responses, meaning that you all were able to pick something from the previous classes, and it's just remarkable. I assure you, Mr. Kingsley is super proud that you are picking in his class, and I'm also super proud that you can fully understand what project management is, and you're also working towards your career path. So that is really amazing. Well done, guys. Well done. Okay, we'll take two more. Eli Yemi said, I learned about factors affecting resource allocation. Okay, so what are those factors that are affecting resource allocations? Toyosi, I would love to hear that from you. Or from anybody, really. Kinda get client changes. Okay, that's one. Oluwasikimi said resource availability. That's two. That's great. Uh, is that all? Is that all the challenges? You don't over allocate and you have to be realistic. Wonderful. Very nice. Very good. I like that everybody is so meticulous and precise with their replies. It can be resource availability, project priorities, or uncertainties. Very true, very true. I think it can said project uncertainties. As Zoe said, it can be resource availability, project uncertainties, and client change. Ngozi also said project uncertainties. Uh, Oluwa Sikemi said priorities across the company. Okay, okay. Project dependencies, economic inflation. I wanted to say nobody is going to mention budgeting. And then Blessing went ahead and said that. So you see, that's really great. It's really amazing that everybody has an idea on that. I really like what I'm seeing. Yes, Ruth, the class has started. You haven't gone too far. Budgeting, true that, very true. Budgeting, okay. Jane said, I learned that in what project you are into, you must have a plan, which is A, B, C, because risks can come up at any time. This is very true and very wise. Very true. Okay. Any more? Plan changes. True. Very true. Very wise. Okay. Okay. Wow. So it's safe to say everybody fully understands resource allocation, and the previous class, and risks and challenges and futures that one can foresee, not foresee, rather challenges that a project manager can forego under a project management, right? A project or during your project management career path. Adejoke said, take a breather also when drafting your plan. Very true. Very true. Very true. So all these are really good answers. Everybody has been really great. I'm glad that you're up to pace with the class. So that means we can go ahead and start the next class. We can start the next topic if it's fine with everybody. Okay, great. So before we go into today's class, how is this is not the virtual assistance class, the VA class. Please more light on risk management. Okay. Pauline, you can always make sure to revisit your the classes through the videos. This was meant to be a catching up, but don't worry. Along the way, I would look for a way to integrate this question into the answer for the next class for this class. Okay. So without further ado, let's dive into today's topic. So, as you can see on your screen, we have project scheduling as today's topic. I don't know who has any idea what project scheduling is. From the top of your head, when you hear project, from what we've been discussing and how we've been giving you terminologies on what project is, and how, as a project manager, your role is to mitigate risks and to foresee challenges, even try to your best to handle unforeseen challenges. What resonates to you when you see project scheduling? Mind you, there are no wrong answers. There is just a thought, an idea, and I would really like to see how the class is. Oh, okay. Uando said project scheduling to me is tracking time. I'm really sorry if you heard the thunderstorm or the cloud. It's raining over here. I have to apologize about that. That's beyond my control. Okay. So Pauline said, "Oh no, it's Pauline. I think you're in the wrong class. I think you're in the wrong class." Or are you answering the question? Okay, you said it's project programming. Okay, project scheduling is project programming. Okay, this answer is very ambiguous. It's very broad for you to say that, because in a way you have tools and softwares that has to do with project scheduling. So it's not an incorrect answer, but it's just really broad. It's not precise, but that's a very good answer too as well. You said project. Uh, One, there's a project scheduling to me is tracking time. Okay, tracking time. Uh, Irene said project scheduling is the allocation of time to each phase of the project. Okay. Irene looks like she has been doing more of reading about project scheduling and going ahead of class. That's nice. Bumi said project scheduling could be an outline of how the project would be carried out. Okay. I can see I have advanced people in the class today. Rachel said process of planning out in details and tracking how the project is expected to go. That was what Rachel said. And that's also good. Rosemary said project schedule is how well you manage your time as a project manager. Okay. Okay. Scheduling is characterization of all tasks in view of deadlines to provide deliverable as what at when due. That was what Oluwasekinbi said. Okay. I am so proud of everybody in this comment session because you are all giving to me back to back. You're all giving me right answers. You're all giving me ambiguous answers. You're all giving me surprisingly what the class is about today. At this point, I would even say somebody should take over from the comment session and just take the class. So I really like that we all have an idea what it is, and I'm looking forward to it. So we will discuss more about the class. So without further ado, let's go to what our slide has to say about project scheduling. Let me take one last one. I said project scheduling is the process of planning and organizing tasks, activities, and milestones to ensure that it is completed efficiently and on time. This is one of the groundbreaking definitions for me so far, and that is really impressive. So, but let's look at what the slide has to say. So, we have a table of contents for today, which is project scheduling. We have critical path method, project scheduling software, MS Project Primavera, and time management techniques. This is what we'll be looking into from, or what we should be expecting from project scheduling. Project scheduling is more of a header to the subtopics and the subcomponents and then the body. It's more than just the term, it's more than just the word, it's more than just the say. It has so much at the back end of it. It has so much in it being a topic on its own and a body on its own as well. And this is the content that we're going to be working with this week on that project scheduling. So let's move to project scheduling. Now, next slide, which is project scheduling, we have project scheduling. We're back here again. So it's a comprehensive guide. So, like I said, project scheduling has so much in it as a topic and as a body. and we'll be looking forward to seeing what it is. So, project scheduling is a critical aspect of project management that involves planning, organizing, and coordinating tasks to ensure timely completion within budget and scope. Remember how I'm always talking about what scope means? Scope can be the overview of a project, scope can be the understanding of the project, understanding the mission, vision of the project that you're supposed to be working with, or the client you're working with, or even the company that you're working on the project. All these are what project scheduling is all about. You being able to identify what the challenges may be, you planning towards scheduling the timelines, the deadlines, the phases, the structuring of a project for easy for easy for easy flow in the project, and having a very clear timeline so that you can reach uh, the goal of the project, so that the project can reach its required success or optimum success of the project. Okay, Doctor still has something to say. Doctor said project scheduling is the process of creating timeline, task identification, and resource allocation, which is still spot on our topic. Very great, very good. So we also have that it involves breaking down a large project into smaller, manageable tasks, assigning resources to these tasks, and setting deadlines for their completion. Effective project scheduling helps to minimize delays, optimize resource allocation, and improve overall project efficiency. So let's take this pointers that they said to minimize delays. The moment each from the first it said project scheduling helps in breaking down tasks into smaller and manageable tasks so that you can be able to have effective use of your resources, right? So when you have a header for architecture, like we usually have in our video, that explains one of the projects that you might be working on, you can always make sure to have a visualization, have a evaluation of your timelines, and also to have a clear viewing on what it's going to take to make sure that the project delivers to the client, or the project delivers before the deadlines. I hope you're all with me and you can hear me. Okay, so okay, great, great. I'm glad you can hear me. So in planning, you have to be meticulous, you have to be clear, you have to be precise, you have to be concise, you have to be understandable and to be comprehensible by not just only your clients but also to your team members or colleagues or workers. The moment you have a evaluated timeline and you most likely put it in a Gantt chart or whatever software you end up using, you have to make sure that it is understandable and the timelines are reasonable. Most of the time, some people tend to give a project a timeline based on not, some people tend to be, what's the word? Let's say bleak or too ambiguous with their timelines. Some might use short term, some might use very exaggerated long term. It depends also on the budgeting, like we also mentioned, of the project. Sometimes you may have a project whereby there is enough funds on ground, there is enough funds to fund our suppliers, get our resources on set, get manual labor, make sure that everything is going will be efficient and smooth, and has a short time frame that mm, is actually very realistic. And you, as a project manager, can manage and see how you can meet up to that deadline because you have been funded with enough money to be able to make sure that the project goes smoothly. What of in situations whereby the funding comes in sections? This then definitely takes a toll on your project. If the funding does not come in maybe one drop, maybe comes in different sections, this might be a bit challenging, but it has to be something that can be also realistic to the clients to make sure that you understand that the funding or the budgeting that you are giving to me as a project manager to make sure that this project goes efficiently and also based on the timeline that you've given me, this is how we're going to calculate, evaluate, and make sure to break down this into realistic goals and realistic timelines. Most of the time, persons tend to believe that if they give you a budget in a very limited, if they give you a budget, they believe that the timing for the project would have to be in light speed, which is not true. You still have to plan, you still have to schedule, you still have to get sources, you have to still allocate tasks, you have to look for resources. And this cannot, we just started okay, sorry. And this cannot be uh, realistic. This cannot be ethical for you as a project manager because you do not just dump something on me, or you do not just you just spring up work on me and not believe that it's going to affect the project. You have to be very clear when you're explaining to them that the budgeting helps in easing the process of. Oh, I'm sorry, Rosemary, about your network being bad. I think everywhere is there is problem, not really a problem. We have the weather challenge, whereas most people do not have strong networks. But I'm sure with time the network will come back and you can will pop back up into class. For anybody that's having problems or troubleshooting with the class, I apologize about that, but uh, it's the weather, it's unforeseen. So, yeah, I was explaining about budgeting helping to ease um, your project and helping you as a project manager to make sure that you are realistic with your clients or your consumers or customers, that you need enough timing to plan and schedule. And if, as a great project manager that you are taking this class, you've already made sure that you have planned against all this in foreseeing challenges and trying your best to mitigate risks. You foresee all this and you have a drafting, planning all the effective timing that is going to take to work on a project. Then kudos to you. You can also have a way that your resources, your manual labor, or whatever services you may be needing may be on standby, depending on how the project flow is. Project flow is very important for to you as a project manager to make sure that you can mitigate risks and to foresee challenges that may pop up during the project. Yes, I did. Okay. Budgeting is key, funding is another. Okay, okay. Yes, yes. So it depends. It all depends. Uh in this case, when I say funding, I mean like the money that may be in the budget. let me be clear so that people don't mistake it. Yes, Akin Loye said without proper budgeting, your project might not be a smooth run. Yes, depending on what you're given to work with. And this may really affect you as a project manager. So you have to try to mitigate all these risks and challenges that may come up along the way. So in our next slide, we have CPM. So with what I've said so far about proper budgeting and making sure to have precise deadlines and resourcing of tasks, I am sure that we are all clear on this, right? And I can move on to CPM. Okay, I think there are persons that are lost in this in this class. There are persons that this is project management class. So if you're in the wrong class, I think you should go get the right link and hop on the right class. Okay. Tiwalaya said, is there any difference between project scheduling and project planning? Yes, there is actually a very big difference. So when you say project scheduling is a step by step, which is not too far from planning too as well. Planning can be the overviewing of a whole project on its own, right? Planning can be an overview of a whole project on itself, on its own. While scheduling is the process of you determining the timeline, deadlines, and make sure that everything is allocated precisely and concisely. While planning, you make sure to overlook at the challenges, you mitigate, you allocate as well. You get, but when you're scheduling, you're being more precise. You're going to follow the whole calculation process. You're going to follow the whole evaluation. You're evaluating datings. You're using your schedule. You're using your schedule. You could use your calendar, which is definitely what you're going to be working with. You can use your softwares. It depends on what exactly you're working on. You understand? So scheduling deals more with timelines, deadlines, and making sure that everybody has an overview and clear understanding on the project timeline. While planning can just be the overview, a clear understanding on what the project may be. I hope you understand that. So, how do we mitigate risks if the funding does not come at once? So that is the amazing thing about you project managing. You trying to mitigate the risks. So most of the time, you cannot go above the budget because you cannot fund more than what has been given to you, right? Nobody is going to work for you under free labor. Nobody is going to want to give you extra time that does not have pay, and no supplier would want to trust you depending rather on your relationship with your suppliers or depending on who are sponsoring or funding the project, right? They will not be instantly willing, most persons will not be instantly willing to give you resources if there is no contract between yourself and this so-called suppliers or whatever your resources may be, right? So the best thing that you can do is to make sure to be very realistic with your planning and your scheduling, where you know that the budget cannot forego, do your possible best to put a full stop to the project so that it does not um, come with so much turmoil or so much challenges that will be out of your hand. These problems could lead to debt. These problems may lead to legal problems, very amazing problems that can pop up. So you have to make sure to be very realistic with the budget and make sure to be very clear with the timelines so that when you know that resources and everything will stop during this projection, you can start looking ahead of time to make sure that you control it. That's just how you can go about mitigating, go about handling breaks. Adejoke said some funding come per phase and at percentages, yes, which should have been stated in the contract. Exactly. So that is why, sorry, beautiful EB. So sorry. Okay. So sorry about the background noise. I apologize. So some funding come per phase and at percentages, which should have been stated in the contract. Very true. Uh, so, like I explained to you, when planning, not scheduling in this situation, like how I think was it Adejokel who asked about what's the difference between planning and scheduling. When you're planning, you get an overview of what the project looks like, right? But when you're scheduling, you're being more realistic with timelines and deadlines. So, in the phase whereby this happens, you understand you have to be very clear and precise and meticulous about it, making sure that everything does not go beyond the budget or does not go beyond you as a project manager and beyond your control. I hope I've been able to explain that to you as well. So Chioma said, even if the funding is divided into phases, you should be able to work the timeline of the funding or budget and your deliverables to fit a milestone. Exactly. Yes, exactly, exactly. Detailed budgeting could help to get by in cases when funding is provided per phase. I remember you once mentioned prioritizing purchasing and buying contractors and paying. Yes, exactly. Budgeting and yes, I explained about budgeting and making sure that everybody is clear because nobody wants to work on free labor time. Trust me, even you most of the times I would say even when your pay does not come in the appointed time, I'm sure most likely your body starts to shake and you start to feel feverish because you've already started planning towards that money, right? So so you also have to be very considerate about your suppliers, your team, your staff, the resources that you have in store, and all of this that will help to make the project easier for not just yourself but also for the team members and those that are handling the project. Oluwa Pikimi said detailed budgeting could help to get by in cases when funding is provided per phase. True. I remember you one mentioned prioritizing purchasing and paying purchase. Yeah, I'm sorry, I repeated that all over again. So, without further ado, I believe everybody fully understands what I've had to say about project scheduling. Is there any other question? Okay. So if no one has any question, great, then we're going to move to CPM, which is critical path method. So in our next slide, what is critical path method? Okay. Okay. So on the critical path method is a widely used technique in project scheduling to identify the longest activity sequence that determines the project's overall duration. This sequence is known as the critical path. Any delay in activities on the critical path will directly impact the project's completion time. So we are always explaining that as a project manager, you have a workflow that you have to work with, right? You have a charting that you have to work with, you have a software that you have to work with, you have scheduling that you have to work with, right? So that is a flow. So when you have a very defined flow of how you should go about your project, that is what you can say CPM is. Because under it, you also have to think about it critically. You have to be realistic. You have to be specific. You have to be measurable. You have to make sure it's attainable, and definitely our usual mantra, it has to be time bound. All of that is very important when when you're creating your critical path method. This helps you as a project manager to make sure that everything goes smoothly and easy. Yes. Blessing said smart. Okay, I don't know if that was a comment or part of your comments from the class, but thank you regardless. So I have a diagram here that explains how a CPM is supposed to look like, right? It explains the flow of how the working is supposed to be like, how the project overview is supposed to look like, based on the timeline, based on your specifics, based on how measurable you were with this project, right? So we have a start date. In every project, in every phase, there has to be a start phase, right? Yes, Blessing and Dorothy. It's now it's clicking in my head. Smart goals. Yes. Yes, I apologize. Yes, smart, specific, measurable, attainable, relatable, or relevant and time bound. I'm so glad that even you people know it. You people know it more than me at this point. I'm so glad that you are able to pick up whenever I'm talking about smart methodologies or smart goals. Kudos to everybody that thinks about that. So back to what I was saying, uh, we have the start and the finish, which is the straight line to how a project should be, right? You have a time for which you're going to allocate for each phase. Let's say we have the digging phase in an architectural building, right? I feel, or yes, there is mostly a digging phase, then there is the building phase, then there's the leveling phase, then there is the whole house itself, then we have the roofing and all that, right? So when will be the start date for this, depending on when the client or the project wishes to kickstart? If we have uh, the project is supposed to start in 2 weeks or is supposed to start in the month of September, what date exactly in the month of September do you wish for us to start this project? If you say it's going to happen on the 10th, that means that as a project manager, from First, you should start your drafting, your workflow, your scheduling, your planning and overview, and then also allocation, and start reaching out to your resources, your suppliers, your labor. You would even have to start putting like a call for manual laborers, right? Because there is a short frame. You have to look for a way. Are you going to outsource the project to another architectural company, or you're just going to access it to youths to try to empower them in the that community? You have to think of things like this whenever you're trying to have a CPM, a CPM overview of your project. Yes, Ogulwa said. Oh, and sorry, said CPM is like a flow chart slash diagram. Yes, it's more of that, but it's where it's more it's it's broken down for you to be able to understand it easily, instead of how a Gantt chart has, the timing and dating all written down in a CPM. It's more of a defined, and then you have bodies that lead to it, and then there are evaluations that go on through it. It's not really as complex, but it's more manageable for you as a project manager to know how to have this methodology at the palm of your hands. So we have the start. So when we start on the first day, you have to write day one and day two. And this is just an example, though, of, let's say, let me use a very short time frame for this diagram. Let's say we have uh, an ad campaign for a a um, a beauty cream company. Let's say that their ad is supposed to be for just 2 days, based on the timing that we have for this. It's a schedule to identify tasks of different units. It's the CPM is more of a schedule that shows the days that have to be involved in the process of your project management journey on a project. It's a schedule to identify tasks of different units. Yes, it also helps you to break down tasks that you need to allocate to department or to departmental heads, depending on how the project overview may be. Does this accommodate just timeline or with activities? Under CPM, we have just it has just timelines. Under your own, it has just timelines depending on what project you are working on. You can have it as your main body, which is whereby everybody has an overview of what they're supposed to see, and then you have the section for each department. It's you have to be very detailed in your CPM. There's the one that everybody has to see for just the timing, and then there is one that everybody's supposed to see for each department. So it can it does accommodate departmental departmental tax, not overview activities, but departmental tax. Because remember, you're trying to break down all the projects into bits to make sure that everybody understands what they're supposed to do in this day to that day and that day to this day. Yeah, it's also it's more than even a Gantt, because when you have your timeline, you have to have timeline for it's how would I okay, so we have the timeline for the project. Let's say we have days, and under those days, we have allocation for them. You have to link them. I'm trying not to go deep into the methodologies, the terms for it, so that you don't get lost along the way. So I want us to easily ease into it so that you understand it. You have to have your timeline as the overview, and then you have to have each department inserted into these timelines. So it's more of like a how what's the word? What's that word? It's more of a like a like how you have your organizational charts that has subsections and bodies. You have to you have to be very careful when you're trying to allocate them to address each timeline to each task. So you can say it's also like a Gantt. So it has sections for each department. Really, yes, it has sections for each department, and then it has timelines for each department. All of this will be integrated in your CPM. Does that answer your questions, Adejoke? It depends on how Ayodele, it depends on how you want your CPM to be clear. So remember how the first time when you saw your Gantt chart, remember how the first time you saw a Gantt chart and you were so scared about it being so complex, being so so much having so much body. So remember how you saw the Gantt chart and you were so scared that you found it a bit difficult to understand. But a CPM helps you to make it look more clearer, more neater, and more elaborate. Because once you then see, the first thing about a CPM is that you may see the scheduling, and then you will see the departmental, and then you see the phases, depending on what software you use. You understand, or what charting you use. Yes, I did. Okay. She said, in other words, CPM is the simplest form of work chart because all the charts seem to do the same thing but different lengths. Pretty much, yes. That is just what it does. It just helps you to make sure that it looks more neater, your work looks more neater and more relatable. When you see this diagram, it's easy for you to understand the flow of what the project timeline is supposed to be for, maybe a phase. This may be for a phase. You're able to understand instantly. You do not see too many numbers, you do not see too many columns, do not see too many rows, because this CPM chart has been simplified for you to be able to understand and for you to be able to relate with it. So I'm sorry, what is your confusion? What is your confusion, Shema? It will. Thank you. Oh no, Irene. They are kind of integrated. CPMs and Gantt charts, it's actually integrated. So but it depends on on which of the tools you use, and it depends on how you wish to what format. Yeah, it depends on what format you use. For you as a PM, you feel more relatable with the numberings, which is based on each column having timelines. I mean Gantt, please. Okay, okay, Irene. Okay, okay. Yes, you can see the flow and understand it, but to your client or to your team members, it may not be as easy for them to understand it. You understand? They may not be able to understand the flow chart. So it is also your work to break it down for them to understand the timelines and how the flow is supposed to be like. The charts all do this. Chema said the charts all do the same things. It's like the further we go, the more we find a more easier way to demonstrate it. Yes, yes, that is exactly what it is. Because as a project manager, you know the terminologies, you know the tools, you know how to go about it. But to a normal lay client or a normal layman, he has no idea what the Gantt chart looks like or what the CPM looks like, unless maybe he has background in project management on and all. Remember the first time, is CPM a version of Gantt? Yes, you can say it's a more detailed body of a Gantt chart. You can say it's a well elaborated body of a Gantt chart. So I'll always take us back to the first time we saw the first Gantt chart. It was it wasn't messy, it was very clean. But to so many persons, they found it so very hard to relate to it because you didn't understand it and because you were not a project manager prior to that time than you are now because you're taking the course, you're fully understanding it. If I was to show you this diagram before explaining anything to you, you wouldn't have any idea what it is. So the fact that you're taking this course makes you to know easier ways that you can go about it in your planning, in your scheduling, in your project success. Yes. So can I use TPM instead of Gantt chart? You can. It's all integrated. Like they're all together. So it's pretty much the same thing. It's pretty much the same thing. So before we continue the class, we usually have our 8 o'clock class, 8 o'clock break. So in the next 2 minutes, we would go on break, and then we'll still come back and deliberate on the CPM because I would really want everybody to understand it before we move ahead. So can I use CPM instead of branch? You can. It's you using the same thing, but you being more detailed. Chairman said, is it okay to say that we can choose any chart based on the methods we're using to carry out the project? Yes. You can choose any charting because when you start to use the software, you tend to see more of a breakdown and you tend to see how the flow works and how it's linked. So you having the back end, you at the back end know what is going on. So you try to simplify it and make it easier for persons that have no idea what your role as a project manager is in a project, which is to ease, mitigate, and help make sure that the success of that project is met. Exactly, Choma. We do. We have the power to make sure that the project goes smoothly. Adejoke said, I think so, but GANs could be said to be high level overall. It's not as complex as you may think, so do not worry. And we are going on break. I'll meet you guys in the next 10 minutes. See you guys then. Riri.
copywriting, content 360.
Welcome back, everybody. I hope we enjoyed the break. I see there's a lot going on in the description box, in the chat box. Uh, I don't know. It's something that if you just take your time, you can ask someone for guidance. If you don't know how to go about it, just ask someone for guidance that you know might know around you. It's not what's the word, beyond asking. Just ask someone around you that is understands how to use the chat box. Okay, so we're gonna move straight into back to what we were discussing. So we're discussing about low CPM and making sure that it is well defined and time bound and clear for you as a project manager to relay to your team members or your staffs or your workers, right? And you can also see the flow as well that was used in this Gantt chart. So yes, we will continue to move ahead. So like I said, we have the start in this format. We have uh, it's supposed to be a 3 day project, but then when you're having a CPM, when you're making a CPM or a Gantt chart, it is always good to always factor a plus 1 day for contingencies or for challenges, or 1 day extra in your timeline or your time box or your scheduling. It is not just a good pro tip, but it is the normal ethical way of creating a CPM. You always add an extra day in your scheduling for cross deadline or before deadline or time frame for a project. Thank you. How do I take this? Okay. Like one more in the there option box. Okay. So we have the next slide. And the next slide is steps in CPM. So we have steps in CPM. So, first and foremost, one of the important steps that you're supposed to take while using CP or trying to acquire CPM is that you have to identify the activities by breaking down the project into smaller parts and well defined tasks. Okay. Making sure to break down the project into smaller parts and well defined tasks. How or why this is so is that you are meant to make sure that your team members or workers understand that must understand that the whole processing they have to take has deadlines, has a time frame, has a time phase, has a given period that we must make sure that it reaches success, right? So when you let's take the architectural building now as one of the problems. When you have um, the digging phase, you have to be realistic. How long does it take to dig? How long is the digging phase supposed to take? What are the tools that are needed for digging? Are those tools going to still be reoccurrence? Are they things we'll still be needing after or post digging? You have to make sure that you define that digging, Jesus Christ. I'm sorry. It is actually. I'm sorry. The location I'm at. Sorry. Sorry about that, everybody. I'm really sorry about that. Yes, it is, but that has been rectified. So let's move back to CPM. Okay. Please let's not be distracted from um, Big Brother and focus on uh, our CPM. Yes, the volume has been reduced. Sorry about that. So, like I was explaining, yes, you can. I know you heard his voice. Let's go back to class. So, like I was explaining, in the digging phase, are we going to be using those tools again? Are we going to be needing more force instead in the digging phase rather than the building phase? Or are we going to be needing more resources in the digging phase? These are things you have to put into consideration when you're trying to create your CPM, which henceforth brings us back to time management and time scheduling. So we have the second step, which is to determine dependencies. Identify the relationships between activities. Some activities may need to be completed before others can start. So in a flow chart, in a Gantt chart, the last time we explained and the last time we showed it, we noticed that some tasks were able to intercede on the same day. Some were able to have flows start in days ahead, while some had to be finished before other phases or other tasks could be accomplished, right? There was that noting that some persons in the class were able to note that, oh, This is how comes phase A and phase G having, correlation to the same date of starting. So it is good to also note that you can also take some of this tasks that you have clearly broken down, clearly managed, and seen clearly a blueprint of what everybody is supposed to be doing, and try to make sure that they are more efficient, and try to work on it to make sure that you even beat the deadlines prior to whatever timeline you have for that phase, which is the intersection or the interceding of methodologies like agile too as well. Whereas, that we spoke about flexibility of a project. The project can be flexible based on how the structure of the Gantt chart or the CPM may be. All this helps to make everything very clear and very precise for you as a project manager. So thank you so much, Blessing, for accepting my apology, and everybody for accepting my apology about the, yeah, moving on. So we have estimate duration. Okay, Adejoke has a question, which is how do we arrive at the alternative route to finish, like on the CPM diagram? Okay, so in the flow charting, while you are drafting your CPM, right, you notice that there are some tasks that have correlation, and it is your role for you to link all of these roles together. One of the features that you will notice are in a CPM is that you will notice there are interlinking, there are intersections depending on the software you use. Almost all the software, some hold, some use MS Project, some use Primavera. So whilst this is going on, whilst this is happening, you as the project manager, you yourself, you see it as even an easier way to make sure that the project reaches its required success or its required goals based on the time framing and the scheduling and the planning that you've done in, the CPM. So once you start using the CPM tools, everything becomes clearer and you will understand it. So it depends on how you interlink them or how you connect them, that will then lead to the resulting or to the finishing of the project. Mind you that I noted, do this software create these links themselves? Is a future in the software. Let me give you an example. Like for example, when you're using Excel sheets, right? You do know that there are functions, there are formulas, right? That help you, be it in multiplications, be it in plussing. That's for those for persons that use like sheets. So these formulas help you to get results rather than you sitting down and calculating everything. It helps with your financing. So pretty much this is how the PM software works. It's there are formulas that help to make this CPM easier for you to be able to understand it, for you to be able to relate with it, for people to also be able to relate with it. You being the project manager have access to the back end, which is the graphs and overview look, the in-depth process of it, while people can then see the outlook, the finished result, the finished working of what the timelines and deadlines and what the tasks and team members or crew members that are assigned to to those tasks or whatever resources are being handled. So with time you get to see these softwares, you get to work with these softwares, and you get to understand fully. Because the fact that you've not started using the softwares, that's why it's a bit. Yes, the fact that you've not started using these softwares, that's why it's a bit difficult for you to understand or to relate. But the moment you do, it's going to be easier for you. It's going to be clearer for you. Do not worry, you're going to get practicals. You you would be able to get your hands on these softwares, and then you get to have first experience on how to navigate with them. You would it will make all of this way much easier for yourselves and for myself, sorry. Please, maybe you can name one of the software so we can be practicing. Okay, so Chama, this is not supposed to be in this class, but sure, definitely. I'm going to let you know the tools that you could use, the two tools that we'll be focusing on, which is Primavera and MS Project. These are the two tools, softwares that you're supposed to be well acquainted with as a project manager. So I will move to the point, which is I hope I've answered everybody so that we can move on. Yes, do you need me to spell primavera for you? So it's PR. Oh, sorry. Primavera. Primavera. Okay, you can still hear my background. I'm sorry about that. Okay, great then. So, okay, great. Primavera, like I was explaining, gotten the spelling from Majala. Thank you. Okay. Primavera. I have to write it down to spell, sorry. Uh, so we have, which is one of the most important pointers of using a CPM, is estimate duration. Estimate duration is you pretty much evaluating the timing that you know you will need to use in the project, right? So meaning that you will have to know when the project starts. You'll have to know how long it's supposed to take to make sure that that phase is over. And you also have to make sure that you have to be very realistic with the time frame. You have to be very realistic with the time frame. Is it going to take 5 days? Is it going to take 6 days? Uh, the pointers you're going to use is um, you're going to use six pointers. You're going to be using 6 pointers, which is the early start ES. You're going to use early finish, which is EF. You're going to use LS, which is late start. You're going to use late finish. You're going to use duration, and you're going to use float. This is part of the methodology or the process of actually evaluating your time, your scheduling. the duration that you're going to be working with. It may sound complex right now, but I'm just going to leave us with just four so that we can be able to find it out in our own leisure times. ES, which is early start, EF, which is early finish, LS, which is late start, and LF, which is late finish. The remaining two is duration and float. Focus on these four steps and it will ease your journey in Primavera and also in your evaluation of time for your classes. Don't worry, you're going to get that in the next class. Everything is going to be in the next class. Okay, ES, which is early start, EF, which is early finish, LS, which is late start, LF for late finish, F for float, and D for duration. This is more of okay. Faith, don't worry, you're still going to catch up. Yes, Shoma. Early start, early finish, late start, late finish, duration, and float. Perfect. These are the processes, or rather, these are the ideologies that you're going to use to be able to make sure that your estimation of time is realistic and clear enough for you to be able to make sure that the project goes smoothly. It's not just setting timelines, it's not just setting dates, it's also you evaluating them. Don't worry, that's going to be in the next class, like I keep explaining. And whilst you use the the software, it's going to be easier for you to understand all that I'm saying. And it's also good for you to also note that the class is for us to interact, meaning that there are things that would have to come up from the top of my head when explaining to the class. But those are things that definitely you would see going on forward. So we have creating a network diagram. Like the one I showed you guys, I showed everyone the class earlier, which is the diagram, which is this from the start to the finish and the dating and the days. I explained to you that it's always important for you to add an extra date for your timeline. The timeline for this is supposed to be 3 days, but with critical path method, you always have to have an extra day. So hence us landing at 4. So that is create a network diagram, visualize the sequence of activities within a network diagram. We have arrow diagram, activity or node diagram. So the one I just showed you is this one, is the node diagram. It's way more easier, right, than the Gantt chart that has just a lot of numberings, right? So yeah, that's what nodes are. And then we have the arrow diagram. Under the arrow diagrams, it just shows the link between a phase, between a timeline, or between a schedule. So we have another point, which is calculate the critical path. Identify the path through the network that has the longest duration. So if I will explain this for you to understand, is that when you have a CPM, clearly you've already done scheduling, clearly you've evaluated, clearly you've stated your your node diagram or your chart to be very explanatory, right? So the point is that you have to make sure that the longest duration too, you can look for ways to break them into little tasks to make sure that it is effective enough for you to reach success in your project. Meaning that for that period of time that the duration is long, what can you do to make sure that it's easier? What can you do to make sure that you make the team or your staff to deliver before the timeline? You are also being very realistic with the time frame, but is this a time frame that aligns your with your client? Is it going beyond the project time frame? All this has to be put in consideration when you have to calculate critical path. So we have the last point on our slide, sorry, which is determine slack time. Calculate the amount of time an activity can be delayed without affecting the project's overall duration. So this is what is slack time, challenges, problems that we know could be faced in a project. So this is you just um, planning ahead. This is you um, forecasting. This is you negative thinking in order to make sure that you tackle the challenges that may come during the project. So duration for slack time and how long can we risk having this challenge go on in the project. It shouldn't be more than a day, like I mentioned, as our slack time or as the extra time that we put in our critical path methodology or chart. So in our next point, we have, yes, Oluwa Sikimi negative brainstorming. That is perfect. Exactly. So we have technique and methodologies. In addition to CPM, there are other techniques and methodologies used in project scheduling. We have PERT, which is program evaluation and review technique. This is similar to CPM, but incorporates probabilistic durations for activities, making it suitable for projects with uncertain activity times. So PERT sounds more like how agile may be. How agile may be. You know how agile has a flexibility rate whereby it's not rigid and you can jump into phases and you can go into other tasks to see how you can handle the projects to reach successful outcomes or optimum results, right? So this isn't more of a rigid process. You have to think of challenges that or phases that can be done to help ease other phases. Maybe let's say in the supply chain, instead of getting the uh, the resources that you need before the let's say what can I use? What can I use as an example? Which resource can I use as an example? Let's say blocks, even though yes, blocks are constantly there when you're building, right? Well, let's say instead of you buying them when you're done, let's say when you've started building, right? And then you have enough blocks for just one phase. Why don't you just buy blocks that you will need for the next two phase so that it can reduce costing, it can reduce well, uh, logistics. Most likely you are spending extra money on logistics to go get these blocks or you have to pay extra for that. You understand? Has uncertain activities, yes. Do we input it? Sorry. If PERT has uncertain activity times, what do we input in for duration when making the Gantt chart? I didn't get that. If PERT has uncertain activity times, what do we input for duration when making the Gantt chart? You have to still put defined times. You still have to put defined times. All that it's saying is that it's really flexible. So for the fact that it's flexible, there are challenges that may suffice. And they might this might be because of costing, this might be because of this might be because of costing, sorry. This might be because of costing, this might be because of budgeting, this might be because of insufficient resources, yeah, or not enough allocation of tax, so or not enough manual labor. This can lead to uncertainties. So this is the point of PERT for you to be able to reevaluate and to replan. So we have Gantt charts. Gantt charts will always suffice its head when we're talking about CPM because it's more like it's mother and baby. There's a relationship amongst them. So visual representations of project schedules showing tasks, dependencies, and timelines. What are dependencies? These are either persons allocated to the roles, resources needed, services needed, and also time bound. We are always going to make sure that we're time bound when we're doing Gantt charts or we're doing CPMs. The classes are online. Yeah, I'm so sorry, Jama, about it. I'm really trying to see how I can handle that. Sorry, I had to rectify that. So we have resource allocations, which is assigning resources, people, equipment to project activities. Without you assigning and trying to manage the problems and risks of a project, it makes sure it has a way of backfiring and making sure that your project does not reach optimum success or optimal success rather, sorry. So this has a way of affecting your node chart or your network chart or whatever or whichever of the MS project tools that or project management tools that you choose to use to make sure that it is relatable and understandable to the team and also to your client. So resource allocation always has a way of sufficing itself. So we have agile project management. Agile project management, like we've said in the earliest classes, is an interactive approach with flexibility to adapt to changing requirements. Agile has a way of making sure that it's flexible enough for you to have changes in the project, meaning that it's not like waterfall that just has direct phases that just makes you complete a phase and go direct directly to the next phase, and it goes directly to the next phase, it has a way of making sure that you can change the timing. It has a way of making sure that you can rectify the timing, and it has a way of making sure that everything goes easy peasy for you as well. If you check in the previous class what agile is, or in your own leisure time try to figure out what agile is other other features of agile, I'm sure you'll be able to have optimal success in your project. Try this issue. Um, I'm really sorry about the whole background thing. Trust me, it's not my best day either. And we still have a few things to run by before we log out. Okay, Trevor, there's no need to be harsh with anybody. It's fine. These are unforeseen circumstances, and I promise you that I won't have this happen again. Sorry, it's just, with Nigeria, there are a lot of like unpredictabilities, and things like this can just be, you know, uh, really unforeseen. So I really and sincerely apologize. So, uh, without further ado, I would just go straight into the classes and make sure that we try to finish up. So yeah, so we have effective project scheduling requires, which is clear project goals, a well-defined project. This is more of a defined elaboration or explanation of the previous one, which is clear project goals, a well-defined project scope and objectives. Shit. A well defined project scope and objectives can help with making sure that you, as a PM, your project goes smoothly with your CPM, with your critical planning and management, right? And then we have detailed task breakdown, making sure that everybody or everyone has an understanding of how the tax should be, how detailed it should be, and there should be a form of understanding and clarity for persons or for your staffings to be able to understand their roles in the CPM chart or not. We also have accurate time estimate. This simply explains that as a project manager and you critical planning or critical scheduling, you have to make sure that your times are accurate, your times are efficient. You can't use too less of a time in your evaluation, in your time evaluation or time description. You have to try your possible best to make sure that uh, it is really clear and time bound. Yes. So we have resource allocation, which I mentioned previously. This is whereby you toss out your materials, source out your tax to your staffs, or you source out your your uh, your materials that are needed for that project. We have risk management, which is identifying and addressing potential risks. This is also you negative brainstorming to make sure that the risks can be controlled and foreseen. Even if they're unforeseen, how can you handle them and how can you go about it? We have communication and collaboration, effective communication among team members. Remember how I mentioned that your team members are constantly going to be having meetings? That's the same thing with your CPM. You constantly might have to always review them and make sure that the evaluation for your timing and make sure that delivery goes in line with what you have in your CPM. You said there is no sound. Can you hear me now? Yes, Mary J, giving feedback on how um, the tax is going through that. Exactly. So we have monitoring and control, tracking progress, and making adjustments as needed. Remember how I mentioned nano uh, remember how I mentioned that you shouldn't that micromanaging can be really tasking for managers, and it's not your role as a project manager to micromanage, right? That's why you have assigned people to make sure to deliver their roles. That's why you allocated it to them. That's why you have competent people to fill in those space, and that's why you're paying them, right? So you have to make sure to get feedbacks from this head of department or supervisors to make sure that your project is seamless, easy, and reaches its optimum goal. Yes, 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 Choma. Yes, exactly. And 10, we have conclusion, which is the final end. Project scheduling is a fundamental aspect of successful project management. By using techniques like CPM, PERT, Gantt charts, project managers can effectively plan, coordinate, and control projects, ensuring ensuring timely completion within budget and scope. Effective project scheduling is essential for achieving project goals and maximizing return on investment. I'm so sorry that today we have reached the end of the class, and I do hope to see you guys in the next class, which less distractions, no big brother, and make sure that we all have one synergy in our classes. Sorry once more, and thank you so much for the class. See you guys in the next class. Bye.